trends from the last 20 months is the emergence of human leadership and the empathetic workplace, or empathetic leadership. We've seen changing needs from staff across all of the organizations that we work with. Their demands have changed and leaders have had to respond. Staff are have seen or wanted greater visibility from their leaders as they've helped us navigate through some of those challenges that I mentioned on the previous slide. Greater visibility. And we've entered the homes of our leaders through virtual meetings, more frequent communications as well. Staff want openness, honesty, and transparency in what they're hearing from their leaders. They want greater transparency and clarity on, where we are today and where we're going to be tomorrow. That means, if our industry is facing challenges, acknowledge those, because they're visible to us. So don't, hide behind other messaging. Just be really clear and honest about what's impacting us and what's likely to impact our future. And that really extends to avoiding being tone deaf. This is absolutely critical. You can't avoid what's happening in the outside world, whether it's things like the prominence of what happened with George Floyd, and then the emerging diversity and inclusion issues that arise as a result of that in the media and the press. You can't sidestep those. So let's face into those. Or whether it's about the concerns around the pandemic and changing working arrangements, or the fact that we're all concerned about, our commute to the office and our physical safety. Staff have wanted leaders to face into those difficult conversations. It's also about leaders showing that, care and compassion for their staff right across the organization in terms of their health, their well-being. And that involves, talking openly honestly about some very difficult subjects. Staff have also requested that they are listened to, that they are heard, and that what they have to say matters. So leaders have had to demonstrate that, through listening activities, we have heard what you've had to say in an honest and transparent way. And ultimately, it's about being vulnerable, being human, demonstrating the impact and showing the impact on leaders personally that they've experienced. It's about storytelling in communications so that people recognize, actually, this isn't just the leader of my organization who's helping us to achieve our future. They're also a person as well. And that creates that sense of empathy. So we've seen the emergence of the human workplace and empathetic leaders over the last 12 months, which has been a big trend. And there's some really exciting and interesting evidence about the importance of, how empathetic leaders are helping to transform organizations and how important that is to our future in 2022. Staff are more likely to 4.5 times more likely to be innovative. And if we think about how we're going to come out of the back of this pandemic, how we're going to see a resurgence, in terms of challenges faced by Brexit and other issues, that innovation is absolutely critical to how we move forward in terms of post-pandemic recovery and growth. Those ideas on how we can serve our customers better, how we can come up with new solutions, how we can be more lean as an organization, be more efficient in our processes. So it's really important that we're innovative organizations generating ideas and solutions. And that comes from having leaders who are demonstrating those capabilities. It means our organizations are more like, our staff are more likely to be engaged, 2.5 times more engaged, in fact. And this is going to help us overcome some of those challenges with the big resignation or individual performance. I've got my own views on what we call, the big resignation. I think it's actually the big revelation. We've got shifting priorities. We like our families. We want to have dinner. We want to have good work-life balance. It's more about those revelatory experiences. And when it comes to engagement, we all know that engagement results in lower absence, higher retention. And retention, as that's a big challenge right now with the big resignation, we want to create organizations where we've got high levels of engagement, and having the right leaders demonstrating the right sorts of behaviors helps us to create that. And in response to the social justice movement, empathetic leaders also help us create more inclusive organizations where people feel connected, they feel part of the organization, they have a strong sense of belonging. And that helps us respond to this social justice movement that's taking place, and that's going to continue to take place. Staff will no longer accept their organization being a bystander in the face of injustice. So organizations being empathetic to this cause, standing by the strategy and the decisions to create greater diversity, to create greater inclusivity and greater representation, that will help us feel like more inclusive organizations. You need those behaviors to be able to do that. Through the work that we've been doing with numerous organizations, we've really got to see, it's almost a privileged view from our perspective here at People Insight of what organizations are doing to help them transform. And these are behaviors that are going to have to continue to create the culture and organization of tomorrow. The leaders have responded by being transparent and honest in their communications. Employees have been craving this, and leaders have responded by giving them this, helping them to understand, yes, there are challenges as a result of the pandemic that have impacted our trajectory, but we acknowledge those, and this is how we're responding to those. We don't have answers to everything, but we have a plan in place to help us identify how we're going to overcome those challenges that are facing us. That honesty in those communications is helping create that connection with leaders, and it's helping rally employees of these times of uncertainty. We've seen lots of leaders demonstrate the value of the employee voice by being transparent, partly because of the types of questions that are being asked in surveys, for example, really hard hitting questions around, well, what do you need to know? What do you want from us? What do you want communications on? And if we aren't able to respond, being transparent about that. So it's about demonstrating the value of the employee voice, because ultimately, if employees feel listened to, they feel valued, and when they feel valued, when they feel engaged, and we have all of those great outcomes from a really highly engaged organization. We've seen a massive shift this year with lots of leaders talking really openly about very difficult subjects. In fact, all of the organizations that I work with are really passionate about some of these topic areas, and that conversation really starts from the top, especially around mental health. The leaders are helping us overcome the fact that talking about difficulties and challenges and psychological strain as something being taboo, and in sense in the opposite of that, actually, being really open, talking about their own personal challenges that they faced. It makes them feel more human. It shows that they're empathetic, but it also allows the rest of the organization to start talking openly about these things, admitting when they are under stress or strain, then being able to have conversations with their manager about the pressures they face so that we can support our individual employees to overcome some of those challenges. It's also around, open conversations around inclusivity. So leaders standing up and articulating the importance of diversity, inclusion, and representation, holding their hands up and saying, do you know what? We're not diverse or representative enough, but these are the steps we're going to take to address that. This is the way forward. And also, more recently, recognizing that the world of work is changing. I'm sure that all of us on this call today have seen all of the noise in LinkedIn and across the media about how different organizations are responding to different working arrangements. Well, leaders are acknowledging that. We're not necessarily at a time where we can come up with a clear policy because the world around us is continuing to change, as we've seen, in the last few days. But it's about being agile. It's about recognizing the strengths and the benefits of different ways of working and how that's going to contribute to the new future of work, and then how that informs our culture going forward. So we've seen this kind of shift, and in this latest phase of the pandemic, we have come more to terms with the fact that we're dealing with uncertainty, and we've started to see the emergence and the resurgence of more strategic leadership needs. So it's not necessarily less about empathetic leadership behaviors because they are being demonstrated. It's now about where are we heading and how are we going to get there. It's about strategic leadership. What are the plans? What is the strategy? What are the specific details that are going to help us get back to where we were heading, whilst maintaining this new style of human leadership? So it's now about merging the two different leadership styles together. We've had from old psychology, autocratic, democratic, transactional, laissez-faire leadership styles emerge. We then had transformational leadership emerge about 4 or 5 years ago, and now we've got the emergence of empathetic leadership. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about integrating those leadership styles to respond to the needs of our teams, our employees today. But just because we've done a good job over the last 20 months or so, doesn't mean, that's our job done, box ticked, we've responded to the needs at the time. We need to continue to demonstrate these newly learned skills as the future of work emerges. And that also means avoiding some concerns like proximity bias. So, in the new world of work where we've got more distance because we're working remotely, are we losing that connection to our leaders, or are we maintaining that? So when we think about how we design listening to inform the workplace and the culture of tomorrow, and taking all of that into account, there's just some key things from a research perspective that we all need to be mindful of. It's about making sure we think about how we listen to staff, whether we do it more frequently than we've done before. So over the last 20 months, lots of you will have deployed targeted pulse surveys, well-being check-ins, or job enablement check-ins with regards to remote working. And more recently, short pulse surveys to identify, are we how are we prepared for our future working arrangements? Are we addressing individual needs? It's about being agile. So thinking about why we're listening to our staff. Well, what are our priorities? Do we integrate those into an annual survey? Do we do a targeted pulse survey? And really having a continuous conversation with staff. It's about the communications process. So just being clear around why we're doing these surveys, so that staff see these, listening activities as part of this continuous conversation. We've done it. We've demonstrated over the last 20 months. We're constantly in tune with what the sentiment is across the organization, and we're clear about how we listen to people. And it's really important to be guided by the right partner, who will help you to define, when it's best to speak to people, and the types of questions and type of conversation that you want to be having with people, whether it's 2 or 3 questions or whether it's 5 questions. You'll be able to be guided by the knowledge and the experience that they have of working with so many companies. It's about overcoming some of the key barriers. So one of the great benefits of the last couple of years is leaders have truly understood and realize the value of keeping in check with employees on a more regular basis. That's demonstrating the value of frequent listening as part of an ongoing conversation. But it's also helping to realize that feedback can help inform decision making. So when we're thinking about our future working arrangements, let's think about the benefits of working from home and the benefits of working from the office, and start to think about how we integrate with that with our sort of future working arrangement policies. It's really important to all of this is mobilizing managers, creating accountability for the employee experience, and actually developing their own capabilities. We do a lot of work with organizations here at People Insight about developing those kind of listening and two-way communication capabilities, how to act on survey results, simple things as how to have an open conversation with your team members, the types of questions to ask so that you can navigate they can navigate some of those difficult conversations, get feedback that's going to result in change. And also just provide them with the tools and the technology and the process, so that it's not about the process, it's about the action, it's about the conversation that you have, it's about what you do rather than how you do those things. And really important to all of this is the involvement of all staff across the organization, making sure that they're involved in helping design and create a great place to work, making sure that we're transparent in how we share and feedback with them, whether it's team feedback or organizational feedback. And one of my favorites is the fact that whether you've got 100 employees or 100,000 employees in your organization, that's an opportunity to crowdsource solutions and ideas, to help respond to the feedback from surveys and the challenges that we're facing, to give feedback to the strategic leadership team in what they need to do. That's really important to this entire process. It's not the responsibility of HR and organizational development to do everything. And ultimately, it's about doing something. We need to show that these surveys have value and that they land. And, it's all about creating an agile culture of listening and responding to action. So the future culture of work is one where leaders, managers, and staff are all connected, because we're in constant contact with each other. We understand what's going on, and surveys are a pivotal way of doing that. Organizations are currently listening to define their cultures in 2020. So what we're seeing is a greater focus on well-being, which is, more often than not, something that's integrated within their annual listening program, and we're measuring things like, overall measures of mental health. How would you rate your overall well-being? We also ask managers, do you feel you've got the necessary skills and abilities to respond to the well-being needs of your team members? So there's almost a needs analysis within that survey, because it allows you as an organization to actually develop and deploy training to make sure we've got the skills and capabilities amongst the people who are on the front line to respond to the emerging challenges. We ask around things like, are we providing adequate resources? Are they satisfactory? And whether or not we've got the right supportive behavioral competencies within the organization to address the challenges. We've obviously been doing a lot of research with organizations on diversity inclusion. We call this special category research. We've been doing baseline measurement mainly over the last 20 months. Where are we today? Are we a diverse and inclusive organization? Are there different experiences between different protected characteristic groups? Where are our hotspots? We've learned, for example, that there's less difference between male and female opinions and experiences in recent years. 10 or 15 years ago, the gap was much bigger. So we closed the gap in terms of gender, but we see gaps in terms of things like ethnicity. And this research gives us a really good opportunity to understand whether or not there are any barriers to us being more inclusive, such as psychological safety barriers, which is the prominent trend which we're going to see emerge. Do people feel confident in the process when they have to escalate a concern? Do they feel comfortable speaking up? And, if they don't, that essentially is something in our blind spot. So how can we as an organization respond to these challenges if we don't know what's happening in the organization? We're also seeing the emergence of, and really prevalent right now, is understanding how the future of work is changing. It's about understanding the impact of current working arrangements. One of the really great things that we're doing at the moment is asking staff to just state, are you working predominantly from home 60% of the time, or predominantly from a normal working office environment? That allows us to look at the data and see whether or not we've got the similar levels of engagement or different levels of engagement. And it differs quite significantly by different organizations, especially those, who have a frontline facing role. You tend to find that actually there's a greater preference and greater engagement in working in an office environment. But it helps to us to understand and identify, well, what do we need our future working arrangements policy to be? And then finally, I spoke a lot earlier around leadership capability. One of the really great tools to help those leaders understand whether or not they are delivering the leadership needed in their organization is 360 feedback. It gives an opportunity for them to reflect and think about, the needs and demands of their direct reports and their peer group. And then it allows for them to learn and develop and grow going forward, to help them, become that empathetic leader if there are gaps in how they lead. We respond to that here at People Insight. We recognize your demands as people specialists and organizations, and we've actually come up with our own frameworks of how to measure some of these. They're adaptable and agile frameworks, but essentially it's in recognition of what organizations and employees are needing that we've developed some of these frameworks, whether it's Thrive for Wellbeing, Belonging in terms of diversity inclusion, or Sprint, which is a solution to help identify and create the workplace of the future, or whether it's about actually we need to focus on our leaders and managers across the organization to make sure that they're meeting the leadership and management needs of today.